Welcome to the Mentoring Lounge, the International Mentoring Community Mentoring Lounge here on a Wednesday at 10 a.m. broadcast Mountain Time. It's wonderful to see you. Doug and I appreciate you dropping by and having a watch. Now, I know it's live, but you may be picking this up in the recording. Either way, enjoy. I think we've got a great topics today, which is looking at how mentoring can support the mentee's mental health. And it was actually a question that came to us. Doug and I dug around a little bit, then I dug around just a little bit more because this is one of Doug's areas, and he can explain a little bit more about that when he does his introduction. But I wanted to dig in and see if I could find statements that may be out there that might not quite be the truth. And or certain verbs we use and things like that. So I thought I would bring them to the foreground here when Doug and I have a chat. So it's going to be, Doug's going to share a lot of his insights, and then I'm going to share some thoughts as well. So it's got, broadly speaking, we've got 5 areas that we're going to take a look at. It's in this diagram here. And we'll be bringing it to the foreground once we get going. But like always, what we're going to do is just share a little bit about who we are. And then I think it might be helpful just to quickly go over the definition of mentoring that we use when we're dealing with the international mentoring community and when we do our certification work. So Doug, you want to just introduce yourself?
I sure can. So I'm Doug Lawrence, and I am the one of the co-founders of the International Mentoring Community. I'm the Director of Practice and Outreach, and my mentoring practice is primarily focused on mentoring and mental health, and looking at mentoring as being a bridge from a support structure perspective. It's a bridge for the whole mental health support structure.
And I'm Stephen Hobbs. I'm with the Wealth Movement, WELLTH, Wellbeing, Well Living to the Nth Degree, co-founder of the International Mentoring Community. I am Director of Certification, and I have the great title of I take care of everything that's going on in the background job description. So it's a fun place. The education level, certainly Doug and I jump in, but Doug takes quite a bit of that underneath this practice banner, and it helps us out as we move forward. So Doug, I think it would be helpful just to briefly go over our definition of mentoring, just so that we have a sort of put some path stones down on the path.
Sure can. So mentoring is a two-way trusted relationship where both the mentor and the mentee learn and develop on a personal and professional basis.
And I think that two-way trusted is going to really play itself out here today, isn't it?
It sure is, most definitely.
Yeah. So let's just sort of position where we are with today's broadcast. This definition that we just given you will sort of find its way back into the conversation that we're having here today. But someone actually wrote in, and I just want to get okay, here it is. I wanted to get their actual wording, and this is what they asked. Explain why mentoring is helpful to a mentee when dealing with mental health issues. And then we came up with, 5 ways mentoring can support the mentee's mental health. We tried to get it back into a video kind of title away from the question, but they're both the same kind of idea. So when Doug and I got together, we said, hey, listen, what do we want to chat about? We came up with the 5 that are in the diagram. And with this, what we're doing is we're using it as a way to sort of summarize the key points, and then we'll add into them as we go here. And I think that that's sort of the best way in which to go about doing it. Does that sound great for you, Doug?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Maybe you can just share a little bit more about your background and why you got into connecting mentoring and mental health. I think it would be important for people from a credibility, relevance, authority sort of mix of why you're going to be sharing what you're sharing.
I sure can. So I'm a retired Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer who ended up, as a result of my service, I ended up with post-traumatic stress, and I've been going through dealing with that. And then on top of that, I've also had to add to the mental health story the aspect of grief, as I lost my wife in 2021 to cancer. So all of those things form part of what's sort of given me the drive to move forward to see. And the idea behind it was I did some preliminary research and just talked to a lot of people, and found that there is indeed a place for mentoring to be part of that mental health story, especially as part of the support structure for mental health. And we'll see as we go through the 5 ways, we'll see how that plays out a little bit more. And what I've also done is I've written a book. It's entitled You Are Not Alone, that actually speaks to just what we're just talking about right now, is the idea that mentoring can and should be, there's no shoulds in life, can and will be part of the mentoring, the mental health process.
Yeah. So it's your own personal insights, then doing a lot of research that sort of got you to where you are today around this topic. If you were to say to someone, hey, listen, I know you're going to be a mentor, it's something you want to do, and knowing where we are, and I'm sort of asking this question from a very broad perspective, considering what's going on in the world today, going on in countries, going on in our cities, and that, what would be something you would say to a mentor that would help them prepare to support the mentee if mental health issues were to arise? Now, I know we're going to go over the 5, but what's a broad idea, something I think that someone could sort of hang onto and work with?
The most important thing, if you are a mentor that is looking at working or mentoring in the mental health space, is to, what I'm looking for and what I'm blessed with is the ability to be able to listen and hear. And that becomes sort of the cornerstone for me to be able to work in that space, is that I'm a great listener. I listen and hear what the mentee is saying, and I'm non-judgmental. And being non-judgmental is crucial, because we're dealing with some very sensitive topics here, where you've got a mentee that may or may not have been diagnosed with a mental health situation, or there's obvious telltale signs that things are not quite right. And so it's a matter of, what are they doing to be able to deal with that, and how can I support them in their healing journey?
So I think it really goes back to that 2-way trusted relationship that you're speaking about, this conscious listening, conscious responding, that on a very high level, truly understanding what that means as a mentor. I'm sort of summarizing it quickly. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. Well, I think what we'll do then is let's drop into these 5 that we have up on the screen here. Now, I would also like to offer at this point in time, these 5 are not necessarily in this order. I'm not saying that. I don't, Doug's saying that. Sometimes it's sort of, they move around. So in the morning, you may be chatting with a mentee and you got one arrangement. Chatting with someone in the afternoon, you got, there's really nothing there. Next day in the afternoon, you got it switched around again. So we're not attempting to say to you, this is how it will unfold. It's not like that. But what we want to do is bring up these 5 because we thought that these had some merit to really look at. And then I'm going to sort of raise a couple of questions with Doug about some statements that I've seen out there. Now, we may cover bits and pieces of them anyway, but I'll come back and just sort of make an emphasis on a couple of things as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to start first with this notion of emotional support. And Doug, you want to just give us a bit of background of what you understand emotional support to be about in a mentoring situation?
Well, the most important things, certainly from an emotional support, is, and we've kind of just talked about it, which is to be able to listen, active listening. So it's listening and actually hearing what the mentee is saying, and then, and being non-judgmental, which is also that important as well. And we want to be able to offer empathy as much as we possibly can, where it makes logical sense to do so. And what I've found, certainly with the folks that I've been working with, is that there's a lot of emotional turmoil that they go through, especially if you have a mentee that is, let's say, a family orientated person, somebody who is looking at creating a business and doing a number of things like that. They're going to be up and down with emotions and their feelings, and it's a matter of you as the mentor being able to, like I somehow refer to it as, is to just zip it and stay quiet and listen and let them sometimes talk their way through. All they're really truly looking for is somebody to listen, and that's probably, if you're going to provide emotional support, that's my best advice for you.
Yeah, I sort of remember this one is because a couple of days ago I was reading a book, and all of a sudden I could start to feel something welling up. And it was sort of from sort of my ancestral history, in a sense, of the family and what was going on. I'm going, this is really kind of interesting. And I sort of, I use my own reflection in, reflection on techniques because I've learned how to do these. But this welling up, you can feel it. And I'm thinking, some mentees, they're in that mentoring connection, in that mentoring arrangement relationship, in the conversation. And all of a sudden they start to feel something taking place. And you're sitting there as a mentor going, is something going on? What's sort of taking place? And that happens as well, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And what makes this really interesting, and it could be considered to be challenging, is that a lot of the work that I know that I do is not face-to-face mentoring, it's virtual. And so then that adds more complexity to certainly being able to deal with that emotional support.
Yeah, and this world, we're using words like isolation, loneliness, seem to be popping up. I'm again talking in broad sense. I've just found a new document that's been put out by in the States, and I can't remember. It's the head of the medical world of the United States, and it's not coming to my my tongue at the moment. But they just put out a new report on loneliness. It just came out, I think, literally yesterday or today. I haven't had a chance to grab a hold of it and read it, but loneliness and isolation, those words are gaining a lot of momentum in our vocabulary. Any thoughts about that one?
Well, you've actually, I did some reading on that for another show that I was doing, and it was the aspect of being alone and actually and loneliness. And so looking at it through two different windows is, can you be alone and not be lonely? And so it was quite interesting going through that, and kind of looking at it from all those perspectives. I took a look at it from the aspect of, say, myself, with my wife having passed away, and so I'm alone. physically, from a physical perspective, I'm alone, but am I experiencing loneliness? And so then, having to be able to talk your way through that. And you're going to have mentees who are struggling with the emotional side of having to, am I alone or lonely? And I've had a couple people that have actually that I do some work with that ask me that very same question is, I feel like I'm alone, or is it I'm lonely, and trying to go through and flesh out what those emotions actually mean.
Yeah, I'm one. I will admit, I live a life where I'm alone, but I don't feel lonely. And I hear what you're saying is because that has been a life that I have found myself living. There are times, and then what I do is I reach out to someone and say, at minimum, hey, can we drop onto a, a conversation? I just need to see your face. Have a couple hours or even 10 minutes of conversation, and that sort of takes care of it. So I hear what you're saying. But I think what this does is that it leads into the next one, which is the sense of the coping skills. Because if we understand as a mentor, the mentee finds himself in a situation, how might the mentor, how might you or I help that mentee? That's helping them to develop coping skills. You want to take that one and expand on it a little bit?
Yeah, I sure can. So the coping skills can be, a number of different modalities that you can be taking a look at. It can include things like mindfulness, relaxation exercises, meditation, cognitive behavior therapy strategies, uh, EMDR, which is I desensitive EM. It doesn't matter. I can never remember what EMDR is, but it it's another modality. I've also, I've gone through, what is it, induced after death communication. So there's a whole array of different coping skills, but I want us to bring this back to something that is more grounded, I guess. And by grounded, I mean it's something that I, as a mentor, can use to my advantage. And the biggest thing from a coping skills perspective is I tell the people that I work with is that you need to come out of the closet and ask for help. And by doing so, you're going to reach out and you're going to say, I need help. And it's at that time point that we can have a conversation about what are some of the things that we can do. And what I've found is that the more that you can talk about whatever it is that you're dealing with from a mental health perspective, the more you talk about it, the the better off you are. And while it doesn't always get easier, it certainly helps you move forward with your healing journey.
Yeah, and I think also as a mentor, this notion of role modeling is is being able to enter into that conversation and not sort of appearing as though, oh, hang on, not talking, sort of ducking and weaving it. No, you're just present and you're sharing, and it'll become obvious a little bit later here. Um, is not making up any stories or attempting to figure out some other way. You speak about the truth. You acknowledge it, because really, if you're helping that mentee find the confidence because of who you are as a mentor, right? To the point that you're raising about, asking for assistance, the confidence, right, to move forward with that, to have the inspiration to come up, is one of the better ways, to deal with whatever is sort of welling up in you. Thoughts about that?
No, definitely, being that, that takes us back to, am I comfortable enough in sharing what it is that I'm experiencing? And I think, that's part of the healing journey, the journey that, you want to go on when you're dealing with, mental health issues and grief and all of those elements. It's the ability to feel comfortable enough to share, and understanding that part of your therapy is the actual sharing of those, of this is what's taking place in my life and this is how it's making me feel. And by sharing that, that's going to help you on your healing journey as well.
Yeah, and again, sometimes they can actually really support the mentor themselves, because caring is sharing, sharing is caring, and being able to bring something to the foreground can even help you as a mentor, right? So
That's
yeah.
right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, why don't we take a look at the next one? And that's this notion. People use terms like goal setting. I'm one who likes outcome setting. That's personal to me, because even in the IMC, we talk about action outcomes, not action goals. It's action outcomes is sort of that sort of has a little bit of a longer play to it, and it has a little bit more, I will call informal rigor. You might, hang on a minute, how do those two work? Oh, right, I see. There's an informality to it, but at the same time, it's got enough of a boundedness that you can work with. So with this notion of the emotional support and the coping skills, to really use something like this goal setting or outcome setting is a value between the mentor and the mentee. Can you expand on any of that, or whatever that might lead you right now?
For me, it's my approach is typically outcome based. And so it's understanding that for everything that we do, there is an outcome, and we mentor and the mentee, we need to decide what is it that we need to have in place today as an outcome that is going to help move us further on that healing journey. Because when you start to shape things from a goal perspective, is that it's I guess the best way for me to describe it is it becomes more organizational, more institutionalized, where we're trying to shape things in that sort of light. And I'm more comfortable, especially when I look at the body language of the mentee that I'm working with, when I talk about, okay, so if we approach things from this perspective, what might the outcome be, versus that may not be in alignment with the goals that we have set. So then it sort of muddies the waters, and it takes us away from from the aspect of, number one, how effective are we going to be at providing emotional support? And number two, the coping skills have now shifted from being something that is very personal to something that is now very much organizational, very much institutionalized, and that's not the path we want to take.
So I think you're bringing up, and what I'm bringing up in an indirect way, so let's make it direct, is the notion that words matter. And when you're mentoring and as serving as a mentor, really paying attention to your words and the words the mentee is sharing with you. And let me just give you an example. Now, again, not everyone agrees with me, and that's okay. But I would like to sort of put it on the table. It's the connection between achievements and accomplishments. And when we're talking about goal outcome setting, is this notion of words like that. For me, I think of achievement as something that's personal. Accomplishment is I'm doing it with others. So I'm going to personally achieve this outcome, but to accomplishment, I'm going to need to work with some others in a very direct way. Because I wouldn't say that everything that you do, you achieve, you just do it by yourself. I'm not saying that, but there is more impetus that the achievement has more of the direction of who you are and what it is that you're unfolding. Accomplishment sort of has group, team, community, what other words you would like to bring into that. So when I'm sharing this notion of supporting the mentee, I will make sure that I'm using words like achievement, and if I have to, I'll define it. I attempt to stay away from things like accomplishment. And to your point, that's why I use outcome rather than goal. It's the language that we're using in terms of that emotional support, the coping skills, and then getting into this goal setting is so important. Any thoughts about that?
I think you've hit the nail on the head with the idea, of words mean everything. How you shape what the path that you are suggesting to the mentee, how you shape that obviously using different terminologies and stuff like that, can determine whether they, as I describe it, whether they come out of the closet and look for help, or whether they decide that it's just not the right time, or you're not the right mentor, and they're going to stay in the closet until they feel comfortable enough to be able to come out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one that one always rings for me. And often I'll say, define the terms and concepts. I'm not saying I do that every time, as I don't walk in, let's define the terms and concepts and agree on them. But I will bring it up and I'll go, hang on, do we both understand what these terms mean in terms of what's going on? That's why we share the mentoring definition at the beginning. Do we have to do it that way? Not necessarily, but it just provides some path stones for us to work with. So speaking about the next ones, why don't you take us through this sense of accountability and responsibility? Because I think these are another couple of words that really matter in this mentor-mentee mental health scenario.
So what I've found that is important is in the conversations that I'm having with a mentee, is to get them to understand that they are the ones that are accountable for the outcomes that we strive to work towards. It's not me as their mentor. I certainly can play a part in it, and the part I play is I listen, I hear, I'm non-judgmental, and I encourage my mentee to talk. Let's talk our way through what it is that you're dealing with, and let's see what are some of the things that we can do that are going to help you on your healing journey. And so, it's making sure that they understand that they own the journey, that I don't own the journey. I'm there to provide support and go from there.
And this story of accountability for, responsibility to, we have to connect it to the hierarchy of values. Each of us has a hierarchy of values. We do what we do because of what we value. And the more as a mentor you understand what the hierarchy of values of the mentee is, and sometimes the mentee may not quite know, and that's an element of the conversation which may influence the mental health aspect. It's sort of woven together. But to your point is, it's not the mentor who's going to make it happen, right? The mentor can bring it to the foreground, but the mentee has to be accountable for, responsible to, right? But at the same time, there's parameters, bounding, bracketing, whatever word you like to use there, from a mentor perspective, so as to not let this get out of hand. True?
True.
Yeah. And I think that this is probably a place to, just because you think you can doesn't mean you should. It's a mentor, right? Well, I've gone through this situation, blah, blah, blah. I've gone through that situation, blah, blah, blah. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to become a mentor and go out and help people. Bring it back here, bring it back, right? And Doug and I are forever saying, just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Doug, you have probably amassed how many hours of mentoring and how many hours of learning about mental health at this point in time? Where are you with that?
Overall, my mentoring, I think I've done about 3,200 hours of mentoring, right from, you know, different aspects of mentoring and that. And the mental health, oh gosh, probably, I don't know, 2,500 hours if I include, you know, preliminary research for my book and the actual fact that more and more now I am finding that every corner that I turn, there's somebody that needs help. And I'm finding that even in the entrepreneurial space, that's where I see a greater need for mentoring, because it's being an entrepreneur is not a easy journey, and people have to end up having to deal with, you know, anxiety, depression, stress, all of those things, and, you know, the potential for not being successful with their business kind of is looming and hanging over them. So, you know, there's lots of mental health issues there for sure.
Yeah, and I think that what goes along with this, and this is one of the action outcomes as part of the certification, is to be able to understand the notion of feedback, feed forward, feed fromward, and this accountability, responsibility that you as a mentor bringing forward. You can provide feedback, which tends to be, well, this sort of happened in our conversation before. I want to bring it back into the conversation. Feed fromward is you're sort of thinking, okay, I want to share something I think that's going to influence the future, but feed forward is picking up on something right at the present, right now, to move that person forward. And it could be as much as to acknowledge the body language as one example. I'm noticing something here, or there's a feeling welling up on me, or I can see. That's feed forward. And to know when to use those is really important as part of this accountability responsibility as you as a mentor, but at the same time encouraging the mentee to pick up on that as well. Anything you want to add to that?
No, you've covered that.
Okay. So the next one that we'll go over, and I think this is one I'm just going to leave with you. Start sharing about referral to resources and see where we go with it, Doug.
So this is an interesting one because it's so easy to get caught up in the trap of becoming the coach, becoming the therapist, becoming the psychologist, psychiatrist. It's so easy to get caught up in saying, well, I think that you would be better served by this person. And whether that's true or not, it's not your place to provide the diagnosis that that's exactly what needs to take place. And so what I typically suggest to people is when it comes to doing referrals, don't. But what you can do is get an understanding from a conversation with your mentee about whereabouts they are with their mental health support structure. What things do they have in place, and then maybe seek advice from somebody as to, from a professional, that I'm working with this particular mentee and I don't know what to do, but I think you might be the right person, and deal with it that way versus saying, okay, we're going to go make an appointment to see Dr. whoever, and that's where I'm sending you next. No, you're not. You're not supposed to be doing anything like that.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, just because you think you can doesn't mean you should. Just because you watched a video on online and all of a sudden you go, well, I think that's what's going on. This is what I'm going to suggest to you. Whoa. Hey, bring that back as well. And that happens a lot, right? Because we do a lot of our own diagnosis and go to the doctor and say, I think I've got this. What do you think, doc? right? And sometimes it's helpful, but a lot of times it's not, because it can get kind of confusing and take you off on some directions. But at the same time, you've got to learn enough to know about what kind of conversation you're going to have walking into it as well. So, from your perspective as a mentor, what would be the overall insight that you would give to a mentor about the mentee and this notion of other resources? You may have hinted at it already, but I'd like you to sort of be a little bit, let's just be blunt about what is it that we're attempting to say to you, dear mentor, around the notion of accessing resources.
Well, the big thing is, and what I typically say to people is that it's not my place as a mentor to diagnose or prescribe. It's my place to listen, hear, and be non-judgmental. And I will walk with you on your healing journey, but those are things that I'm not able to help or to do for you. Those are things that you have to be able to deal with, and it's most mentors, if I were to show them, I can picture it right now. I have a PowerPoint slide that talks about sensitive issues or sensitive topics, and it's a whole PowerPoint slide full of different things. And when I'm presenting on mental health and I flash that up on the screen, people start to turtle right away because I'm not comfortable talking about that, or I'm not comfortable talking about that. And so once they start to understand what is involved in, being a mentor and being part of that support structure, a lot of them will step away or shy away from going down that path.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's great. Okay, well, thanks for that. And I think that what we've done is we've sort of covered off the 5, Doug. I think we've sort of gone through them. There was a couple of points I wanted to raise, and part of this came about because of other people making some kind of statements. Now, I'm not going to say that these are myths or totally taking things out for an incorrect spin or anything like that. But some people have, said some things to me over the last couple of years, and I just want to sort of bring them to the surface and see what you got to say about them. Now, everyone listening in, Doug does not know I'm going to ask this part of it, because I'd like to just sort of, I don't want this to feels like it's any kind of scripted response or anything like that, right? So the first one is that mentoring is fully confidential. It's even more so than what a lawyer might do. So anytime you hear anything, it's totally kept between you. You can't share it with anyone else. Confidentiality is the end all be all. Any thoughts about that one?
I would say that confidentiality is high on that priority list of things that need to be in place. Does it always happen that way? It depends. It's yeah. I guess my best way to answer that is yes. Confidentiality is very extremely important, and I guess because I live and breathe by that. And when I tell my mentee that, what conversation that you and I have is, stays in this room and goes no further, I mean that. So, in that particular case, I guess if I follow through on that, then yes, it would be the answer.
Yeah, my response back for that one, the one really bold exception is do no harm.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's one that we have to take a look at and weave that one in, right? Harm to self, harm to others. But I know where the person was coming from, but it was that bold, puffed up statement that it's always confidential and you can't break confidentiality. And I had to go, well, what about this situation? And then we had another conversation, so it was great. The next one that someone brought up, they says, make sure that when you're mentoring and you're bringing up a situation that you think is important, dive deep into your personal experience, because that's what the mentee wants to hear, right? And make sure that you bring everything that you felt and feel and did to the surface so that mentee has everything to work with, because that's what it means to bring truth and trust into the arrangement.
Yes. And the more that I can provide to my mentee, the more successful they're going to be. And looking at this from a mental health perspective is that they're going to be able to facilitate the outcomes that they're looking for because of that.
Yeah, I'm still one of the ilk where I may not give every detail, but I'll give enough that you have a good sense of what that experience was about, right? There's some times in my life where I have seen the atrocities of war, and you don't need to hear all of it, but some of those influenced how I think and what I do and how I approach living life. But I don't necessarily want to talk about things that I saw that, okay, would they be helpful? Maybe, but I don't need to quite go there. So there is still some, I'm not going to go completely like that person said to me, is go deep, tell everything. I still may just play with that a little bit. So the next one was celebrate the achievements, but you don't have to celebrate the achievements of mental health when you've corrected mental health situations. What the person was saying to me was, great, the person you've helped them deal with some mental health situations, but you don't really need to celebrate like that. Rather than celebrate, well, you got your work outcomes taken care of and you achieved what you needed to achieve there. They were sort of making a distinction and celebrate one more and one less. Any thoughts on that one?
I know that with the folks that I've have been working with and are currently still working, when they make inroads into addressing their mental health issues and challenges, I typically will not congratulate, but I will acknowledge the time and effort that they've put into making the changes. And, from an outcome perspective, ask the question, so we've done a lot of work towards, achieving this outcome. Do you feel that you've reached that? Or do you feel comfortable that if I were to ask you that question, which I'm obviously I'm doing right at this particular time, is do you feel that you have moved forward a sufficient amount of time that we've addressed the outcome that we were searching for?
Okay. Yeah, I attempt to celebrate to the level of what I know the mentee enjoys celebrating. And I won't necessarily make a complete distinction, but I will back off the celebrating at the beginning. But as time goes by, there's some things that we need to do a little whoop up about there and really understand. And whoopee, yeah, this is great, and you're able to get through some things. But I temper it a little bit as I'm working forward. So. Here's the next one, and this one was a kind of an interesting one because I didn't pick up on it at the very beginning, right? And then I listened to the subtlety of what the person was saying to me, and they were saying, well, as a mentor, is that I encourage the person and I help them go meet someone who has something similar going on in their lives, right? And I went, okay, yeah. And then all of a sudden I went, whoa, hang on a minute. Any thoughts?
I would definitely be getting permission from both parties for that to take place. I wouldn't just arbitrarily say, okay, let's go have a coffee and, oh, hi, by the way, guess who's joining us? And I would definitely be getting, I would be getting permission. And a good example, I'm part of a bereavement group right now. There's 4 of us in the group, and we have yet to bring anyone in to the group other than the 4 of us until such time as, we actually get permission from the entire group that this is going to be okay.
Yeah, and that's where I sort of went with it, because at the first I was saying, oh yeah, that'd be great. That's a support structure that you can do. And then all of a sudden I went, I shook my head and went, hang on a minute. Did you just say that what about from this perspective? And then this conversation unfolded with them as well, right? So it was kind of an interesting point, all right? So the next one was, a person said, one of the best ways to deal with anything as mental health related is go out and exercise, go out and get involved, get your cardio up, get it going. And that's what I recommend to everyone, right? And I encourage my mentee to go out and do it. That's the best way in which to do it, because that's how I found out that it's the best way in which to do it. Any thoughts on that one?
So when did you become a doctor? Like that one, we talk about mentoring, the two-way trusted relationship, and we talk about, that as a mentor, you listen, you hear, you're non-judgmental, and you don't prescribe, you don't, do any of those sorts of things. You don't, and so by suggesting, this is what I do, this is what makes me feel good, and you should go forth and do much the same sort of thing, I would not be comfortable with that.
Yeah, I have to agree, because I enjoy walking with nature. All right. It's not that I'm going to go out and start running with nature. I'm going to grab a bicycle and start bicycling with nature. And I attempt to walk with nature, but I don't go to the mentee and say, the best way in which to deal with it is go walk with nature, go hug a tree, because that may not be where that mentee is at. It'd be more of, how would you go about adding some kind of physical activity? What would be your mental activity? What might be a spiritual? And just sort of ask them and get them thinking through what's going on. I think that was how I would approach that in response to what that person, but they were being so adamant that you need to go exercise. And I'm going, all right, let's just take a look at this. I want you to take a step back. So I did a little mentoring at the moment. Just take a step back from what you just said to me and look at what you did. And all of a sudden you could see this. You know how that light bulb goes on?
Yeah.
Oh, hey, oh. and it was great at the moment. But sometimes those 5 things I hear, right, and variations, and that's why I thought that I would ask you. But I think we're getting to pretty close to closing down here, Doug. Again, I would just remind everyone, wherever you're finding this broadcast, comment, like, share. If you're on YouTube, subscribe. That'd be wonderful. And just to remind you is that what we're talking about here, sort of covering it off, is for mentoring and the mentor supporting the mentee's mental health. There's emotional support, there's coping skills, there's goal outcome setting, again, language that you want to use, accountability and responsibility, and the notion of referral to resources. Those are ones that we wanted to bring forth today and sort of take a look at. And I would encourage you all to go back and listen in and just sort of see and pick up what might be of use to you. But this gets us to closing, and like we do on all mentoring all things mentoring lounge, is I bring everyone in. What's going to happen is Doug's going to take us out. When I know he's done, I'm just going to say take care. and we'll close off the broadcast. Doug?
So in today's world, in the global world, there are so many people that are still in the closet and afraid to come to step outside of that because of the stigmatism that's attached with mental health. What we've hoped that we've done with you today is to give you the tools that you need in order to help those people step out of the closet and become that productive individual, somebody whose mental health will continue to be on the path to healing. And that's an important thing, certainly from my perspective. So take care.
All right, take care.